Hey everybody, back again with Griffen. Zach, how are you?
I'm good.
You and your wife were just newly minted middle school coordinators.
Yeah, yeah, that's a new development. I've been doing middle school class for I actually think it's like 2.5 to 3 years now.
Yeah.
And so I get to start developing my own team to help me. And Garrett said we're gonna, get some more resources for that room back there and just to help me out because I've really just been going in making stuff, making games, making questions up,
Oh yeah.
on the fly that morning.
Well, you like you said,
And
like you've already been doing it, so it's kind
yeah,
of cool to get that
yeah,
full control, and then that way you guys can grow it. You
yeah,
know what I mean? It's like one of those ages where it's like you really. I feel like the balance is good for them to have a service with the adults and then have their time away because it's so easy to get distracted at that age and just
yeah.
zone out. So what kind of like motivated you to start that?
Well, I mean, part of it was just serving in the youth group, when it was just Caitlin and Alexa and Sean and I. I was teaching like every other week or every third week, and I just had the thought. I was like, these kids are like, they're not that they weren't understanding, they just didn't have like the vocabulary that I was using, which is my fault. And I was like, there's got to be a way that we can help kids transition from kids church to like more adult services. So I went to John. Well, I ran it by Alexa because she's my filter on good and bad ideas. And she was like, that, I think you're right. So I went to John. I was like, listen, we're taking brand new sixth graders, pulling them out of, kids church where they're, playing games. They're learning like good Bible stories, but barely like surface level.
Right.
And I was like, and then they're coming in and they're listening to you break down like really deep stuff when they read the Bible. I was like, they probably don't understand. Or if they do, they're not understanding all of what you have to say. It's like I pitched like we need an in-between where they still listen to you, but then they have like time with people their age where they can take some of these old stories they learned about in Faith Kids and just add a little bit of depth to it.
Yeah.
Get a little bit more like biblical vocabulary, like what is mercy, what is grace, what is all this kind of stuff, because we just throw those words around
Right.
with no definition.
Yeah, and so many of us just assume we know what that stuff means, and then someone's like, "Do you really know what that means?" And you start breaking it down, and you realize like how much they don't completely understand. I think it's one of those things where like whenever I was at that age, there were sermons where I really enjoyed John, and then there were sermons where me and Zach Stinson were just like goofing off the whole time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it really is like this fine balance, and I think it's good because you kind of know what they're getting taught a little bit already, and so like, okay, I can build on this.
Yeah.
And I just think overall, as our church continues to grow, the more years we put in, the more the foundation is going to grow.
Yeah.
That the higher the levels are going to be for these kids to understand, because I feel like the kids who come to, youth and teens in the next couple of years are probably going to be even just a little bit more of a step up than what we've been seeing. You know what I mean?
I think so as well. And it thrisely benefits me because if they're more educated and they have a little bit more understanding when they get to youth group, then when they leave youth group, they have a lot more understanding when they come to me for young adults.
Right.
And so I'm not, and this is selfish, but I'm not like having to re-explain different things because they're coming out of youth group with a more foundational understanding, which I think is a good thing. And I like to use the example of like the story of Jonah. We did a study on Jonah in middle school class, and I was like, what's the big point of the book of Jonah? And of course their answer was he gets eaten by a fish.
Yeah.
And because that's the thing that sticks with them from, faith or from kids' church. And it's not wrong. That's like the funny part of the story. But I was like, that the fish is only in there for like 2 verses.
Yeah.
I was like, it's not the main point of the story. And so we went through and we like took a story that they knew and like broke it down to like a deeper understanding of what, the author was actually trying to say. And, I explained how the book of Jonah is actually meant to be a mirror to hold up against ourselves and all this kind of stuff, and loving our enemies and doing all of these things. And I was like, and at the end, I was like, so what's the point of Jonah? And none of them said, the fish.
Right.
And then I was like, but the fish is a picture of Jesus coming, like going to the grave and doing all this kind of stuff. And that kind of like blew their little minds all over again once I explained that.
I have to check out that book again. I haven't read it in a while.
It's one of my favorites.
The thing that always blew my mind was his heart after he went and actually did the thing. And where he was up on the whatever waiting for everyone to get judged by God. It was crazy for me to see that and go like, how do you get to that point of where you fight, and then you finally do what you're supposed to do, and then you still kind of like want judgment on the people you were kind of sent to save. It is kind of a crazy... But we all do that, don't we?
Yeah, my favorite part of that story is what he actually says in that final chapter. He's complaining to God, and he's like, God, I knew you would do this. Like, he says, I didn't want to come because I knew you were forgiving. I knew you were full of love. I knew you would do this. And I told the kids, I was like, I do that.
Yeah.
Like, how many times do I avoid a conversation because I don't want a person to repent or to be forgiven or do all these kind of things? And as like, I'm inadvertently having that same conversation of like, God, I knew you were like this. I knew you would do this. And it just, that's my favorite part because it's, a gut punch every time you read it.
Yeah. How has the young adults been? You got a couple new faces in there, or how's it been?
Yeah, we've had a couple new faces and some of the old faces coming in, and we took the summer off. And so we've been meeting for 3 weeks now. So we're still trying to get the ball rolling, trying to get people to come in. And the thing with young adults is everyone's busy. Everyone works. And so, but for the ones that come, we've done some review these last few weeks. They're actually about to start our first like actual study. We had multiple questions from multiple different young adults for more clarification about the gifts of the Spirit, the gifts of God. So we're going to do it. We're going to do a breakdown. We're going to do the gifts of the Father, the gifts of the Son, the gifts of the Holy Spirit. So I'm actually using John's material to study for that. That's what I'm going to do this week is I'm going to prep for our discussion on the gifts of the Father.
Wow.
Because we had young adults that were like, I'm so confused.
Right.
And it's not John's fault, but John's up there, speaking to, more mature Christians probably in a lot of cases who have the vocabulary and stuff to do it. So I was like, hey, that's a perfect first study. I was like, let's do it. So we're gonna break down. I'd like to keep it to 3 weeks, 1 week for each, set of gifts. We might do a fourth where we talk about like operating in order, kind of like John's been talking about, because I'm super passionate about that.
Yeah.
And I think it'll be good. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, and just like reminding yourself of like continually searching to be in the Spirit, because we were just talking about it. Danny Kid's actually been talking about that in our life group a lot, has been talking about being spiritually minded. And we actually went over the gifts of the Spirit, or the fruits of the Spirit, and then the bearing one another burden is right there. And I remember when you taught that to the youth, and I was bringing that up because it came to mind. It's like we have to be mindful of these things to help one another because we're all going to get in our flesh eventually. Yeah. So what do we do when we end up in our flesh? Well, find someone who we can trust to help us get out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's actually something I've been really like working on here in the last little bit, is like understanding or like putting more into practice and really trying to walk out the gifts that I know God has for me and has given me. The first one being like words of wisdom, prophetic words, that kind of thing, where I've been really trying to lean into like exercising that, especially with the youth, because there's been several times that I say something, I'm like, hey, I should probably go tell this to a kid. And I go say it, and it's like exactly what they needed to hear. You know, it like rocks their world. It encourages them, all this kind of stuff. And it's like, okay, that's a gift I think I knew I had, but now I know. And I know more of what it, like the voice of God sounds like when it comes to operating in that gift with it. I think it's super cool.
Yeah, it's good to like grow in your confidence in it, because part of you is like, is this me?
Yeah.
And then part of you is like, oh yeah, that's God, right? So yeah, kind of like this like fine line of where you can either be over, but I think just, these kids are so hungry, man. I mean, we had a kid opening up to us about his family life and how there's like not a lot of Jesus in the home. And so he's like, how do I know? Yeah. They're asking like real deal questions. So we have to be, to the best of our abilities, trying to stay spiritually minded to help them. I just a couple weeks ago, you were helping a girl, and we're just trying to help them and also support the parents at the same time, because we're only hearing one side of the story. Yeah. And it can be kind of like tough to maneuver. I kind
of drug you into that conversation because I didn't know. Like, it was a tough thing for me to try to answer.
Yeah, they're not throwing softballs at us, that's for sure.
No, not at all. Yeah, it's like they can't be like, does Jesus love me?
Yeah.
Yes. No, it's always difficult. And trying to answer in a way that, is full of love and grace to them and, the other party and whatever they're dealing with. And trying to, like, not go all Christianese Bible ninja on them and being like, well, this verse says.
Yeah, one of the kids was saying, like, at least you guys aren't harping on, like, us being if we talk about where we don't feel like we feel God, you're not, like, harping on us for it. Like, other churches I've been to, they're like, you're sinning or something. They try to go immediately into that almost Christianese stuff, Yeah.
And that's something else I've been trying to work on, too, is I've always, like, grown up in I've always been around and familiar with the gifts of the Spirit and stuff. I talked a little bit about this last time, but I read something the other day that if we're not careful, we use the gifts of the Spirit to, like, try to shortcut our maturity. It's like, because I have this means I'm mature. And so we take the gifts of the Spirit and we're like, well, this is a substitute for the fruit of the Spirit. And we're trying to do in a short term what the fruit of the Spirit is trying to do long term. And I've been trying to work more on, like, the fruit of the Spirit, on, like, being gentle and being patient and being all this kind of stuff, because, that's going to be more transformative to people around me than, cultivating my prayer language, which I still do,
Right.
But, like, for the people around me, the fruit of the Spirit, joy, peace, gentleness, self-control is way more, like, beneficial. I think way more difficult.
Yeah, that's what Danny was really, like, hammering home just Friday with us, was like, where are some of these things that you see you could, like, work on for yourself? Because I'm seeing some areas in here that I can work on, because without love, we're just a sounding cymbal, So it is really important to, you can't just magically wake up and be a mature Christian. You have to, like, it's a consistent, daily sacrifice, obedient walk you have to. And I totally agree. Like, sometimes we feel like we're, like, stepping up maybe a little bit faster than we really are, because we're walking in some of this gifting. Yeah. But the fruits are so important. And right there after he names the fruits, he says, don't be conceited. don't provoke one another.
Yeah.
You know, those things are quick ways right back into the flesh where you might be in the gifting of the Spirit one second and then be conceited the next. And that's immediately going to wipe away all of that spiritual stuff you were just walking in.
And I can, you know, I can give a prophetic word to someone, but if I don't do it gently, you know, they may not even receive it.
Right.
So I've been trying to work on like gentleness, like especially in the youth where a kid comes and they're like, you know, pouring their heart out about something super difficult, to like, just like be gentle with my words, be gentle with, you know, all of that kind of stuff, because I don't know if they get that anywhere else. So
yeah, it seems like for me, I don't know how much they're retaining, and I feel like it's probably not a whole lot. You know, like if I sit here and I tell them like 6 paragraphs, the likelihood of them capturing any of it is very. So I really try like a punch game where I try to get that punch in, like, hey, take this home with you, and a lot more just listening, because it seems like, you know, with anything, if you say it out loud, it's out of you. You know, if it's in you, it's in you, and it's bothering you. So if we can let them get a lot of it out, and then just give them that 1 or 2 little things, I think that speaks volumes to them. You know what I mean? And like, I just think of myself at that age and how conflicted I was. I was so passionate for the Lord, but I was also like starting to experiment with the world. And I know some of these kids are probably in that exact same place in their life, and trying to like tell them like, hey, this is my experience. You know, obedience is like probably one of the most important things I could tell them over and over and over again. Yeah. And so it's fun, man. It's been exciting.
Yeah, it's rewarding to see kids, because I mean I've already had some come up and be like, hey, you know, I was merciful this week, or something like that, where they're probably like trying to not be silly, but tell me something, and I'm like, well, you know, regardless if they're telling the truth, they're thinking about it. They're recognizing, like, hey, I had a moment, or I had a chance this week, and that kind of stuff. Or had someone come up and be like, my mom and I got into it, and I realized that it wasn't like I wasn't responding with grace, or I wasn't responding with like self-control and all these kind of things.
That rebellious mindset is so dangerous. Yeah. Because that's what happened with me, is I started resenting and rebelling against my parents, and that was the quickest way to the enemy. You know, Paul mentions it over and over and over again, being disobedient to parents, along with all of these like horrible, terrible sins. And you can almost like gloss over the fact, but like a lot of it stems from that, you know, and those, you know, usually if you're being disobedient to your parents, it's usually when you're younger. I mean, as you grow up, you usually figure it out. Not everybody, but I think they go hand in hand for sure. What were some things you got out of the faith conference?
Yeah, well, I worked the whole time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was taking pictures and stuff. Yeah. But it's funny because I had on the first night, Thursday night, you know, I'm up in the balcony, I'm editing pictures that I just took while whoever was speaking. And Alexa texts me and she's like, hey, this youth told me that they feel like they have a word for you. Wow. I was like, okay. I was like, I'm busy right now. Like, you know. And she's like, well, just talk to them after service. I was like, okay, I will. Well, I go downstairs and I step out in the foyer, and there's some like middle school, high school boys out there that I didn't know. And one of them comes to youth group, so I knew him. And he was like, hey, my 2 buddies, like, they want to know like when they can get saved. And I was like, what do you know? Right now. And so I led them to the Lord, and I prayed with them, and I went and got Garrett, and Garrett came, and we talked with them for probably 30 minutes and prayed for them again and all this kind of stuff. I stole Bibles from the prayer room and gave them to him. And it was just super awesome. And then after the service, I went to this youth that said they had a word for me, and they told me that, I just felt like God's going to use you this weekend for more than just taking pictures.
Wow.
And I was like, well, he already did. And I told her the story, and she's like, oh my gosh, freaking out. And so it confirmed, number one, that she was right. And number two, that she's operating in a gift that like, she was like, do I have it? Do I not?
Yeah.
And it confirmed that, she was hearing, from God as well. Because this person had come to me probably a month before, and she's like, I just feel like I'm messing up, and like I feel like the gifts that I have, that God's gonna take them back. And I was like, no, stop. That's not true. It's like, you can stop that. And so I think that weekend where she felt like she had something and she told me, and it was immediately confirmed what I told her of like, that's not how God's gonna operate. He's not stingy, and he's not gonna, his gifts are irrevocable is what it says. So he can't take them back.
That's so cool.
So I kind of like, it kind of like dual encouragement at the same time. So we had a nice moment.
God is so good because he knew what you were already going to do. Yeah. And gave that word to her, and it's just immediate. Yeah. How much more immediate confirmation
I know,
can you
exactly.
get?
And then there was the next night, Lex and I had the opportunity to pray and minister to a girl who was having, troubling suicidal thoughts, and we were able to get her help and do all these kind of things, and it worked out good. I had some questions for John about something, but we had a nice conversation. I got it figured out, and good came out of it, so I can't complain.
It's interesting how those demonic presences kind of multiply at the same time. These thoughts of suicide and stuff, and how it starts with one, and then it seems like it kind of spreads throughout because it seems like more than one youth have had an issue with these kind of things, and so it's like interesting to watch as we grow, and in these seasons of growth, we're gonna come across these trials. Yeah. And one other thing, real quick, before we like lose it, is that that's the importance of more than just Garrett. Is that like us all sharing and caring for these kids and being there for them. Is I was sitting right next to that group of 3 guys, and they were just sitting there with their thumbs up there. I thought they were like just goofing off, not really wanting to be there. Next thing you know, you walk down the hallway, you take them outside. I'm like, what's going on? You come back around, and they just ask the Lord into their heart. So it's awesome how we're meant to be there for like a specific purpose, a specific person even. And so that is neat that, even just you walking by was like he felt comfortable enough to be like, hey, what do my buddies do? And you're like, they just do it. It's just like you just get saved.
Yeah, it was awesome. And I think it's cool how each leader has like kids that, I mean, it comes down to matching personality or matching, interest or something like that, which I think all the leaders are really good at. Being like, oh, you're into this? Like, why don't you go talk to this person? Or you're into music or video games or sports or all this kind of stuff. Everybody can talk to anything, I feel like. Yeah. But we do have people like more focused on, like, if you're into baseball or sports, Garrett's a great person. Like, yeah, I like sports, but my knowledge is limited. I'm in a fantasy football league, and I have no idea what I'm doing. So even I'm just like, oh, this person looks pretty good, and click. But it comes to music or some video games or anything like that, then I'm all on board with talking, and it helps create connections with kids. And I don't think any of the leaders are like jealous that one kid might gravitate toward another leader. Right. That doesn't bother me at all. So
my hardest thing was feeling like getting my foot in the door. Felt like it took a while for me,
and it can.
But it's not like a jealousy thing, because like if a kid's not meant to communicate with me, it's just not meant to be. Like I don't have to feel forced into it. You know, I'm pretty. That's one thing about us all being pretty secure in who we are is like, we're not like, we got to be the center of attention.
Yeah.
And so, I kind of seem to find some of the outcasts and some of the guys who, even that new guy who just came Gunner, and just pulling him aside and talking to him. Like, I like the quieter ones, and he seemed like he was receptive, which is like always super encouraging to me to see one who immediately in the door is like sitting there taking notes and stuff. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah. So I think that's awesome.
All right. So you want to dive a little bit back into your testimony with us? And
sure.
You want to dive into either your marriage or, raising your daughter? What do you want to dive into?
Yeah, we can talk about marriage. Alexa and I have been married for 11 years already.
That seems crazy.
I know.
You're 30?
31.
31?
Yeah. So I got married when I was 20. She was 21. We started dating while we were in youth group. I was a senior in high school, and she was just out of high school. But we had obviously been friends for multiple years. I mean, we were all in the same group, same youth group together. And then we started dating when I was a senior, and then we both went to school at WKCGC. Mm-hmm. So we had like a year and a half of just, date. We dated for like almost exactly 2 years. It's just a little bit longer than 2 years before we got married. Mm-hmm. But we had been dating for a year and a half. We got engaged. And then that January, I went ahead and moved to Murray to start school and get an apartment and all that kind of stuff. And then we got married in May of 2013. And so that was at the end of the semester. So she moved to Murray, and we had that whole summer of like no class, just kind of doing stuff, which was nice.
Yeah.
And so we've been going strong ever since.
What's it like being married in like college?
It was good. We were the only like part of our friend group that was married in college, because we met a bunch of friends while we were there through the on-campus ministry that we were part of. It was different being the only married couple, but still being the same age as all these other people.
Yeah.
But it also made our house like the house to go to. Mm-hmm. And so like, it was like, oh, we'll just go to Zach and Alexa's, and they'll cook for us. They'll do all this kind of stuff, which
they'll do the grown-up
we
stuff.
Weren't cooking fancy stuff because we were broke and in college.
Yeah.
But, we weren't like mom and dadding it yet, but we were like, since we had our own apartment, we weren't living on campus. We were kind of like the place to go to if they wanted to hang out.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff. And, also, since we were married, we were a little bit more comfortable. Like, I mean, when you're dating, you want to spend all your time together. But we really started developing like having our own friends and having like that time apart. So I was super into like long distance running at this point.
Okay.
And so I was running like 5 to 6 days a week. And so I would just text Alexa and be like, hey, and me and Nate are going to go run. I'll be home in a couple hours. And we would go run, a half marathon together. We'd go run 10 plus miles.
Wow.
And she would be like, okay, well, I'm going to go with this person, and we're going to go, work out or go see a movie or go eat or do anything like that.
Yeah.
So we really started developing like that healthy, like time apart.
Yeah.
Even as newlyweds. So I think that was super good.
It's good to have that. You need that. Yeah. Everybody needs, guys need time with guys, and girls need time with girls. It's so important.
And we continue to do that now. Like I have dedicated time every month. We never know when it's going to be, but where it's like me and Cameron and JP and our friend Samuel and all of these things. And Alexa has time with Caitlin and Audrey and Carissa and all these people that she goes and like hangs out with on her own.
Yeah.
Alexa likes scary movies, and I do not. This for the record, do not scare me. I will say things that should not be said, and I will probably like either scream or start hitting. And so if a scary movie comes out that she wants to go see, like a monster movie or something, she doesn't go with me because I'm not going. So she has her friends that like scary movies and all that kind of stuff. And I play golf some, so I go play with Cameron, or I go play with Stephen Curlin, or all these kind of things where, you know, I have people, or even just go play with Ella.
Oh yeah, that's
because she likes to come with me. But just like neither of us are like jealous with our time.
Did you get any like pushback when you guys got engaged? Was there any like, hey, you guys are too young for this, or
not from anyone that
mattered
to us? John, of course, was all on. He was like, "I love you guys. You guys are awesome. I can't wait."
Yeah,
you know, he was psyched about our marriage counseling and marrying us. And during our marriage counseling, he would talk to Alexa because if he looked at me, he'd start laughing.
Oh man!
And so he would do all the counseling to Alexa and then like make a joke to me.
Oh man!
But no, we were all on board. Parents were. Alexa was like number one choice for my parents. So the quicker that we could get her married in, the better.
Yeah.
Yeah. There. Once we got married, it was like, this is my daughter, Alexa, and her husband, Zach. That's what I tell people.
That's the most important thing.
Yeah. Like my parents or my mom texts Alexa way more than she texts me.
That's awesome, man. You know how many people have unhealthy relationships with their their
in-laws?
Their in-laws, yeah.
Oh no, the opposite.
Yeah.
But even while we were in high school, before we started dating, my dad was like, "What do you think about Alexa?" What do you, like? And he'd go to Alexa. Alexa was dating someone else.
Oh no!
And he'd be like, "Why don't you date my son?" And she'd just be like, "Bill, you know."
That's so funny.
And I'd be like, "Dad, stop, please."
That's so funny. He had a soft spot for her.
Oh yeah, 100%. He was like, I literally prayed Alexa into the family. And she's like, well, it worked. So, but we had a couple people where I was like, you know, I want you to pray for me because I'm about to ask Alexa to marry me. And it was like, whoa, like, this is a mistake, you know. It was a really weird reaction. It only happened with like one or two people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't know what you're doing. There's no way you could understand. There's no way that like it'll last, kind of thing. And it was really. I was like, this doesn't feel like sound advice. This feels like, you know, maybe you're unhappy and you're cautioning me. And so like when someone, I have a young adult that asked me to marry them next year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I got to get ordained, but, I don't really I don't have the grounds to like, be like, you're too young.
Right.
Will I we told them like, you're going to come meet with us. You're going to talk about all these kind of things. Yeah. But you know, if it seems like, you know, something real, then, you know, it was real for us. And when someone called into question, like me not being old enough, it really hurt.
Mm-hmm.
So, but other than that, like one or two isolated incidents, no. Everyone was on board. You have
wisdom of 11 years, you said, of marriage. I mean, for your age to have that much understanding of what it takes is a real like asset.
Yeah.
And like you can look at someone who has a younger relationship and it might have been a while, but you still know some of those things, right? Like for me, like if I gave young adult advice, because I have one of them who comes over and hangs out with me, you know, I do have some like experience. And Jody and I, we've been together for like 9.
Yeah.
We've been married for 4 or so. But, you know, you can see the red flags and help them with that, you know, or how's your communication?
Yeah.
Let's start there. Because if you're not communicating well, you need to hit the brakes.
Yeah.
Because it's so crazy how, I'm sure you know, like in years of marriage, how you think your communication is really good and then you have like a real conversation and you're, we need to have more of those. And then you like work on it. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And like, is your communication good? Are you on the same page about money?
Right.
Are you on the same page about if you want kids or not?
That's a huge one.
Yeah.
people don't just magically wake up and change their mind on some of that stuff. Like,
and you know, and if you don't want kids, which I don't think there's anything wrong with not wanting to have kids, but you don't, it's going to be difficult to marry someone who is like very passionate about having kids.
I completely agree, because that's what their life. I mean, when you want a kid, that's kind of like your drive of life.
Yeah.
Is like you want that, so that is a big thing.
And so, just asking those questions, Alexa and I mean, communication always gets better with time.
Absolutely,
we're still not 100. No one's 100%. You know, I don't think, but we communicated well. We were on the same page about money. We've always been on the same page about money. I don't think we've argued about money at all in 11 years.
Yeah.
Which is, I think money's like the number one like point of contention in marriages.
Yeah.
And so for us to avoid that is a great, you know, asset. We've always been on the same page with money. We both wanted kids. I actually started to teeter, like, I always recommend, like, get married, do not have kids immediately. Like, have multiple years where it's just you.
Yeah.
If you can. And so, like, we had 4 years of just the two of us.
Yeah, it's nice.
I actually started to teeter to, like, not wanting kids.
Yeah, you get comfortable a little bit.
Yeah, I was like, I kind of like it just being the two of us. And she was like, I know, like, I get it. Like, is it really what we want, though? And I was like, you're right.
Right.
And then I was like, we should have twins. Like, twins would be great. And Alexa's like, well, hold on. And I was like, twin girls would be amazing. And she's like, okay, like, too far. And then we had Ella, and we, like, no argument. I think that's enough. I think we're good. And so we agreed on that immediately, and it's just been like that. It's been awesome. But going back to that question, everyone was on board with us getting married. All parents were good. And all siblings were good. Devin, of course, loved Alexa, and Alexa loved Devin. So, and then same with me and Taylor. Everything was all good there. And then in college, we actually did have we were already married, so it's like we can't not be unmarried. But we had some, like, leaders that seemed uncomfortable with a married couple being in the group that we were part of, because there was other people who were dating in the group. And so I don't know if, like, the idea was, like, we're a bad influence somehow because we're married.
Yeah. And
nothing was ever said. It was just, like, treated weird because we were the only married couple in this Christian, or in this on-campus group. But nothing bad came out of that. It was weird.
I guess people would immediately fear that couple would want to move in together or do things, try to, like, fast forward their relationship. But I mean, it's not like you're sitting there and promoting that. So I guess that's just people being, like, overly, like, aware of a situation.
Or some kind of weird idea where it's like, we're gonna, like, the thought of, well, we got married. Maybe they got married so young just so they could have sex.
Right. The sex
or
thing
something,
was immediate.
Something dumb, which I'm sure I'm taking out, but Paul's like, it's better to get married than to not. He's kind of making that argument to a degree. That is not why we got married. Love, of course, was the reason we got married. That's just a benefit. But I don't know if that's, like, the thought process of why we were married so young was because of that. I mean, that wasn't it. We waited until we were married.
Right.
So it was like, there was, like, not bias toward us, but just weird thinking. It felt like it could have been just solely on our end. Yeah. But
I don't know. Usually you can read people pretty good.
Yeah. And
but
no one, like, no other students in the group had a problem. with us being married. They actually kind of thought it was cool.
Yeah. So when you waited to have your daughter, and then what was it like whenever you were like first becoming a father? What was that like?
Yeah. So we found out, you know, obviously we were super excited. It was, I mean, people say this all the time of like, your life is never the same. I mean, they're telling the truth though. Like it does radically change overnight.
The things that you're told as like an almost parent, like the like cliche status quo
I know.
things you get, it's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, they're like, I hope you're
ready to not sleep.
Yeah,
again?
I hope you're ready to not sleep. It's like, okay, I'll show you. And then the baby cries for hours and you're just like, oh, they were right.
They're all pretty close. They're pretty spot on for the most part, but it's still a little annoying.
The one thing that and not too many people said it, but when we were like, we're having a girl, it's like, oh, well, get ready. She's the easiest kid.
Yeah.
Like there has not been a single thing where it's like, you know, she's got too much attitude or all this kind of stuff because she's a girl. No, she's been like the easiest kid ever. She's great. She listens well. She doesn't back talk. She's super loving to other people and all this kind of stuff. And so like the whole people telling us, oh, well, don't you wish you had a boy?
Oh, I was going to say, didn't you get that a bunch?
Oh, nothing makes me more mad.
Mm-hmm. Because you seem like a great girl dad.
Oh yeah, I wanted girls. I wanted twin girls.
Right.
I knew like from like being a teenager or like like when we got married.
Right.
Like I want to be a girl dad. That's like what I wanted. And so to have someone be like, well, are you going to try again for a boy? No, I'm not. And even if we did have another one, I want another girl. Like, and obviously that's nothing to people who have only boys or a boy and a girl or anything like that. I had someone being like, well, who's going to carry on the Griffen name? And I'm just like, I don't care about that.
Yeah.
Like the name that should be carried on should be like Jesus, if I can, you know. And my dad doesn't care about like the longevity of my mom's dad had only girls, you know, and he was a great dad. He doesn't need, you know, that name to continue on in perpetuity to be important or anything like that. But yeah, that kind of thing I was not expecting that. I was like, we're having a girl. I was like, we're gonna be past that. Nope.
Not in Paducah, Kentucky.
Nope. And that was the most frustrating thing of like being a new dad of a little girl was like, it made me angry.
Yeah.
Like I was upset when comments like that would come up. And
you know, John just taught Sunday about parenting and our job as pastors of the home.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. So it really ties in really well with like what we're talking about right now. What are some things that you've done in your lifestyle to instill that like we're living for Christ, you know, mentality?
A lot of it has been like being real intentional with having Ella, number one, be able to communicate her emotions to us rather than like trying to hold them in.
Yeah.
And so like we're really, Alexa more so than me, I'm learning, kind of comes more natural to Alexa. But like if I notice Ella's upset, getting her to like express, like use the words to tell me how she's feeling.
Yes.
Like I'm upset, I'm mad, I'm angry, I'm embarrassed. Mm-hmm. Like giving her the vocabulary to like tell us how she's feeling so we can help. That's a big part of what we've been doing. Another big part is like we do like a prayer. I guess you could call it I don't know if you call it a prayer or like a mantra or whatever, but we call it her words that we do at night, especially if she's had a bad day or something. It's like, I'm special. I'm loved. I'm safe. I'm going to sleep good tonight. All these kind of things. And then teaching her, like, she came to us one Sunday morning. She's like, I want to give my life. I want Jesus to live in my heart. Okay, let's do it. Alexa and I got to do that.
Yeah.
Which is a big deal. And, she even, like, in the car, there was another kid in the car with us, and she was upset. And Ella was like, you don't have to be upset. Jesus is with you. Like, just little things like that, I think, is more important than being like, Ella, did you read your Bible today? She's 7. No,
right.
First of all.
Right.
I'm teaching her, like, my goal is to teach her practical ways of, like, loving other people and understanding that, like, Jesus loves us and Jesus isn't, like, mad at us and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, those actions speak louder than words. And, John was talking about it, and he was talking about, like, do you read the word in front of your kids and stuff like that? And for me, I got a 2 and a 3-year-old, or almost 2-year-old. So it's like, I kind of wait till they go to bed. So I'm kind of like re-contemplating things that I can try to do. It's not that I don't want to do it around them. I want them to see me do these things. The biggest thing for us has been the worship, because my sons love to worship. But, it's like, you can't sit there and say, you got to read your Bible for 15 minutes, So trying to find these things that we can incorporate into their life. It was a service. I felt like it was probably geared towards people with kids who are maybe a little bit older, but you got to start as soon as they're, that's what got Jody and I back into church, was having Caleb. Was like, we need to get back into church. And it was, radical for us. So.
And I mean, you saw, I assume you saw Ella up there dancing at the faith conference with Alexa and, Face Center posted a picture of it. Like, it might just be music to her. Yeah. I'm kind of okay with that to some degree, or to a lot of degree, because, she's 7. I'm not going to teach her about, start using these large words where she doesn't know what they mean. And I don't even know if I could define a bunch of different stuff, but she has her little Bible and she'll open it up, and for some reason, she loves the story of Jesus dying on the cross. And I'm like, well, what do you think about that story? And she's like, well, it's sad. I'm like, well, why is it sad? She's like, because he died. I was like, yeah, but does he stay dead? She's like, no. And then she closes her Bible and lays it down. Oh. I'm like, oh, that's pretty good. But here recently, the big, like, parenting push that Alexa and I have been doing is, and this isn't us, we stole this from a pastor that I really enjoy, or that I like listening to. And he said, raising his kids, he had 2 goals in mind, and that was it. And he said, number 1 is to make sure that they don't hate themselves. He's like, because a kid or a teenager left to their own devices will hate themselves. And he said, that's number 1. And he said, number 2, make sure they don't hate Jesus. And he was like, he's like, in my opinion, and I agree with him, if I can do those 2 things, I'm successful as a parent. And so, like, with her going to school and, she doesn't struggle in school, but she misses something and she's like, well, I didn't understand or something. It's like, it's okay, more comforting, not like, we still need to learn this and we practice and stuff, but it's all done out of, not a sense of, like, criticalness. It's all done out of love and making sure that her, like, she doesn't ever question that she's not good enough or not loved or not anything like that. So that's my goal here recently, is I've put those 2 things into place of, like, that's my measure of success as a parent, is to make sure that Ella doesn't hate herself and make sure that she doesn't hate Jesus.
That's what the world will do. That's what the world wants you to do. That's what Satan wants you to do, is hate yourself and hate Jesus. And it's not going to come at you like, hate yourself. He's going to come at it in a artistic way and this nuanced way of thinking. But the kids today, anxiety and depression levels and all these things are skyrocketing. So you can see the path he wants for the young ones is hating yourself and obviously hating Jesus. I mean, the emotional reaction you'll get from some people just for even saying Jesus.
Yeah.
And, that's something that I don't know if I encountered a lot at school. Not that Jesus was talked a lot about in like middle school on, but these kids nowadays, they might have more of like a knee-jerk reaction to even hearing about Jesus.
And I think part of that is, don't necessarily think it's their fault. I think part of the way I'm going about doing this is like, it would be unfair and unwise for me to be like, I'm a representative of Jesus and then be like overtly critical and be, like super hard and super punishing and not very forgiving to Ella and all this kind of stuff. And then for her to grow up and be like, well, if that's Jesus, then I'm done.
And then that's going to rub off on her, and she's going to treat other people that way.
Yeah. One of two options. She becomes like that.
Yeah.
And be like, Jesus is mean and Jesus is harsh and unforgiving. Or she says, I'm done.
Right.
And I mean, to be real honest, I don't blame kids that do that. If their only picture of Jesus is like a parent or a pastor or a youth leader who's just critical, and unforgiving and unloving and unwilling to like stoop down and to their level and all this kind of stuff, I'm not surprised when someone says Jesus, they're like, stop, I'm done, enough. And and John talks about this all the time. Like, we're supposed to represent Jesus to people. And what kind of Jesus are we showing them? Are we showing them a Jesus that's judgmental and unloving and, punishing? Or are we showing them a Jesus that's forgiving and gentle and all this kind of stuff? So if my goal is to make Ella not hate Jesus, then I have to make sure that it's not a Jesus worth hating. It's the people in the Bible that hated Jesus were the, religious elite and the people that had something to lose and all this kind of stuff. The people that loved Jesus were the normal people and the sick and the outcast and all this kind of stuff. So if I'm like, all these people are worthless and your friend who's not a Christian, she can't come to our house.
I'd much rather have her at my house than for my daughter to go or for my sons to go to theirs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But if I were to approach Ella's friends like that,
oh yeah,
of course she's going to be like, well, my friend is more real than your Jesus is.
More real than I'm choosing my relationship with you even.
Yeah.
It can get to that point.
So I'm choosing them.
Right. They choose them. Exactly.
And there's no one to blame but myself.
Yeah. I think parents do have a fault.
And it's not always the parents' fault. You can also, it could be, a bunch of different things.
At some point, that child will be accountable for their decisions.
Yeah.
And I totally agree with you. Like, I see why they end up in some of these situations, and it's heart-wrenching to even think about it. If you really sit there and just process it and know, like, to no fault of their own, to some point, you know, this is why they've formed this idea in their mind. But that idea has become like a religion in its own right. and eventually, they'll be old enough to where they've got to. So, but what you're doing with your daughter is instilling, an action-based, loving-based relationship to where when she presents that, when she emulates that to the world, like they're gonna take notice, and it's gonna be, wow, this is something I've never. My other friend, she gossips, but whenever I go to, it'll be totally different. You know what I mean?
Well, like the other day, she came home and she's like, "Dad, at recess, some kid like slapped me." And I was like, "What'd you say?" Because she's holding her ear and she's like, "Look how red my ear is. He hit me." And these are her words. She said, "I put my arms down and I made fists," but she said, "I didn't do anything. I walked away."
Wow.
And I was like, obviously, I told her, I was like, if it happens again, let us know, because it doesn't need to keep happening. But I was like, you did good by not hitting him back or not being like trying to retaliate or trying to do something back to him. I was like, that's a good choice. And
how scary is it when your kids finally start making decisions on their own? Because I feel like that's got to be kind of like a overwhelming thing.
And she's come home and she's like, "What does this word mean?" And it's like a cuss word or something. And we're like, "Well, that's a word that's not nice." Or she'll say something and we're like, we don't call people that.
Right.
And she's hearing it from kids at school. She's hearing it from, TV or whatever. I don't know.
Right.
And if we say, "Ella, that's not a word that we say," I've never heard her repeat that. Like she's very concerned with, like, if we say that hurts people and hurts people's feelings, she does not want to do that.
Yeah. And
I think that's a great thing to not to have this like self-control of like, I want to hit someone back, or maybe I want to call someone a name, but I'm not going to. I consider that a success.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so funny listening to her tell stories because she's in second grade.
Yeah.
So she's like actually making her own friends. She's going, she's had play dates at her friend's house, and her friends come to our house, and it's just, I can vaguely remember second grade and my friends, and it's funny to now like watch, from an adult perspective, watch those friendships develop. Because based on, if it's anything like my friends I made in first and second grade stayed my friends, all the way till today. And so it's like, here's a friend that she potentially is going to have for the rest of her life, and just watching them interact. And my best friend in high school was like a whole head and shoulders taller than me, at least, center for the basketball team. Yeah. It's like 6'3", 6'4", something like that. And then there's me, the shortest kid in the class. That's exactly how Ella and her friend are. Oh, Ella man. Is the smallest in her class, and her friend like can pick her up and carry her. She's a whole head and shoulders taller than Ella. That's awesome. So they came out today and they were holding hands while they were walking to us after school. And her dad and I were laughing because just the size difference.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
It's so funny.
Well, you got anything else for the people before we hop off here?
I'm not sure. I don't think so. Other than just, like I said, to bring it all the way back around, that what I'm focusing on with, marriage and parenting and stuff is just developing the fruit of the Spirit, because I know that's what's going to last.
Yeah, that's a great place to start. It's so confirming for me, because I was just hearing about it Friday. So I love how the Spirit has been speaking consistently. It really shows that He is speaking to our congregation, to our friends, to our circles and stuff.
Yeah.
And so thank you again for coming back on. We'll have to do it again. Yeah. Maybe we'll get Cam on here, and we can
that'd be an exciting.
That'd be fun to like hear more about how y'all became close and stuff. So
we'll talk about the old youth group day, because you've known Cameron probably longer than I have. I feel like.
Yeah,
didn't you play baseball together?
We did. We did. I've known Cameron since we were like 10 or 11. So he was 8 or 9 whenever I was, well, probably even sooner than that, because my dad tells me we were coming here whenever I was like 8. So basically right when the church started.
Yeah.
So we were really actually kind of closer when we were way younger. And then we kind of like had a few years where we weren't as close, but we've always known each other for a long time. So
it'd be fun.
Dude, go way back.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks for checking in. I'll talk to y'all next time.
Thanks.